Yes, I'm going to talk today about the maintenance mode scaling problem. Before I start, I want to say a big thank you to Peter, to Roy, to Maxime, to everyone that works on NewCrafts. For those who don't know, the pandemic lockdowns happened at a time that was very difficult for this particular conference. I had come the previous year, the conference had gone to great pains to look after me and my family. That I was really grateful for. And I was really disappointed when NewCrafts didn't happen. So I'm really excited to be back here again after 4 years. I know the organisers are as well. So I have a favour to ask everyone. When you go back to work, please tell your colleagues to come next year. Please submit to the CFP here. And please ask your company if it will consider sponsoring. Okay, because this is a really great conference, I think. And to be speaking on the same programme as Dave Fye and Kent Beck is really something for me. By far the two biggest influences on my career. I've known Dave for years. He's a good friend of mine. I've long stopped paying any attention to what he says or thinks because I'll just agree with all of it. Kent, I've never actually met, and now I'm not going to meet him because his talk was moved till tomorrow when I actually have to go home to put my kids to bed back in the UK. So I like actually to not meet Kent because I was actually quite nervous about it. I like the idea that we're still being kept apart, even though we're now in the same city and he's in a hotel being sick just across the road. What am I going to do? I'm going to talk about maintenance mode, the kind of unglamorous, dry topic that I'm famous for. And I'll cover 3 different solutions to it. I'll explain why 2 are not a good idea and why a third one that I've cooked up is a better idea. We'll cover a composite French retailer by weaving in some different customer stories to kind of give it a sense of anonymity. I've long forgotten which company is which bit, which is really helpful for when I get questioned when I return to work. And I've also got some data. We've run a survey at work of about 40 different companies on how they handle maintenance mode. So it's all going to be very exciting. For those who don't know me, I'm British, which means my sense of humor is very, very dry. If you don't quite know if I mean something, that's probably because I don't know either, okay? Did I even mean that? So I'm the head of the scale service at Equal Experts. We're a global technology consultancy of around 3,000 people. And oui, c'est vrai, je suis un roast beef. Je suis désolé pour le Brexit. Nous sommes devenus fous. That's as far as I'm going. I see the guy at the back is like smiling like he does speak some French. He lied to me. Okay, so head of scale. I talk to our customers and our consultants about scaling problems when they emerge, how to try and fix them, and then I actually often contribute to the actual solutions. What's a scaling problem? It's something that harms you or it's something that slows you down when you are scaling up by adding more teams, when you're scaling steady by optimizing your teams, or when you're scaling down by resizing or retiring teams. And obviously in the current economy, a lot of our customers are talking to me about scaling down rather than scaling up because they're sensible. Different scaling problems occur at different stages in a product lifecycle. In my experience, these kind of problems are invisible, they're annoying, and they're really quite hard to fix. So let's talk about the maintenance mode problem specifically, which happens towards, obviously, the end of a particular product lifecycle. So everyone close their eyes. We're going to just dream with me, okay? Just have a little dream. We're working in an organization, we've got lots of teams, and we've got lots of services. Maybe there's a hodgepodge of monoliths and microservices. Maybe there's a zoo of data pipelines. Maybe it's a spaghetti of all of it just mulched all together. You can open your eyes again, just imagine. And of all of these many services, some of them are differentiators. Some are going to set us apart from our competitors. I don't want to talk about them. Forget them. I want to talk about the majority of services that you build, not because you want to, but because you need to, because the SaaS can't quite cut it, and you just need you need a user services, you need an authentication thing, you need something like that just isn't going to set you apart, but you just have to build it. And your teams work really hard to build them. Those teams work really hard to continuously deliver planned features to your customers, to learn from your customers, to iterate and improve. And then over a period of time, their product features slow down and the deploys slow down. And that's because that service is reaching zero demand. Now, zero demand doesn't mean zero faults, because as the late, great Dr. Richard Cook was fond of saying, software can never be fault-free. Zero demand doesn't mean finished, because software can never be finished. And zero demand doesn't mean zero user needs, because you can't ever entirely satisfy users. Zero demand is a polite way of saying there is zero funding at the moment that remains for any further feature development. And if you work in an organization where IT is a cost center, then this is inevitable. It's going to happen because there will be pressure to reduce costs on CapEx at least once a year. Sorry, no point fighting it, that's going to happen. I've tried to fight accountants before and failed. They're very wriggly. So what happens is you have your zero demand services, and then you have to put them into maintenance mode. You might also know this as keeping the lights on. You might know it as BAU support. You might know it as evergreening, which I'm trying to discourage as a term because it sounds a bit weird. Have people heard of this before? Anyone work at a company where they've talked about putting something to maintenance mode, or they talk about keeping the lights on? One person has their hand up. Now, if anyone here is thinking only one person knows what Steve is talking about, surely he now won't spend another 40 minutes in a tedious tone of voice describing the exact problem. That is what I'll do. That is exactly my plan, and I'm going to press on for that one person over there. So, the problem is, when we've got all of these zero demand services, who looks after them, right? Because they're like the Norwegian blue parrot. They're not dead, they're just resting. They still need looking after, right? And you can spot this problem by looking out for its symptoms. Somebody might say to you, we need to increase capacity to start work on more services. Or they might say, we need to reduce the number of teams to save costs. Maybe the same person is saying both of those things at the same time and biting their fingernails and drinking in working hours. I've seen that before. But it's a really serious problem for a lot of companies. To solve this problem, what you need to create a zero demand ownership model that allows you to achieve two new outcomes. You need to be able to create more capacity for your teams by reassigning them to new work. And you need to be able to reduce costs by resizing and retiring your existing teams. But that's not enough. From bitter experience, I can tell you that you also have some existing outcomes that you need to protect. It's really important that you don't sacrifice existing outcomes just to achieve some new outcomes. You need to protect your current level of services reliability. You don't want to have more incidents. You don't want to lose more money because you've changed the way that these zero demand services are handled. You need to protect job satisfaction. You don't want people to become more unhappy than they already are because that might have an impact on churn or on even on retention across the company. And crucially, you want to protect the level of feature delivery. Zero demand doesn't mean you're never going to work on a thing. You will have good ideas. It doesn't mean giving up on improvement. It doesn't mean giving up on enhancing customer experience. What it means is you'll do it less often, but when you do it, you're still going to want to do it quickly to get that fast feedback. You still want to have a short deployment lead time, even as your deployment frequency decreases. Okay? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to achieve two new outcomes and protect three existing outcomes. And if you didn't get that Norwegian Blue reference, you'll have to look it up. The Pythons were great for their time, although one Python now unfortunately keeps saying things about being cancelled when they're clearly not being cancelled because they're saying things in the public space. So, okay, let's get to our first solution that plenty of people will know. How do we handle maintenance mode? We don't change anything. We leave the work with the delivery teams. So what does it look like? You've got a bunch of delivery teams. That's a polite phrase for project teams that are just delivering features and they feel like a bit of a feature factory. Whenever someone says delivery team, they just mean feature factory, okay? So let's see, the purple diamonds are differentiator services. There are two here, the product details page and the online checkout experience. That's how we're going to crush the competition. And we've got 10 non-differentiators, things we just have to build, like an order capture service and a payment service. This is a composite French retailer. It's not really French, but I do like France. The first time I came to Paris with my wife, I told her on the train, remember, sweetheart, we have to say bonjour at the start of every conversation, otherwise we won't get served. She called me an idiot to my face. We went to a boulangerie. She started the conversation with hello, and we waited 20 minutes for a loaf of bread. To this day, she refuses to acknowledge that there was any kind of connection between a hello and a lack of service in France. So I actually mentioned that to her yesterday, and she said, please don't put that in. So when she sees the video, what's she going to do? She's going to do nothing. And she won't watch this. And with this maintenance mode solution, what happens is the same delivery teams that built the non-differentiators. I must stop discussing my marriage in talks. I must stop doing it. It's a problem. I had feedback at work recently to stop using marriage analogies with customers, so I need to up my game. So with these non-differentiators, the blue lines signify that we are moving these services into the background, okay? So each of these delivery teams, the 10 teams that work on non-differentiators, they maintain the thing in the background and they're given a new thing to work on in the foreground. And here's what it looks like when these services are run in the background. That's what the orange means. The delivery team is doing two things. They've got a thing in the background and they've got a new thing that they're working on as well. I'm showing it happening all at once. For brevity, of course it would happen incrementally. Of course it would happen at different points in time. I know that I'm from Cornwall, but I do understand how time works. So the 10 affected teams here, they're now working on new non-differentiators, new services, and their team names have been updated to reflect this because the teams are named after services. This is entirely correct. If you name your teams after something other than the thing that they build, if you name them after Greek gods or metro stations or the Beatles or something you find clever, then you and I cannot be friends and we're going to have to go our separate ways. I did work with one customer a while ago where I shouldn't tell this, where I said we should rename the teams after what they build. It didn't happen, and then eventually the product manager came to me and said, Steve, you're right, I've reached my breaking point. And I said, what's your breaking point? And they said, Team Lovely. And I was like, yes. I'm looking forward to their nemesis, Team Horrible, turning up and really ruining our day. I should have disguised that name. That team actually was called Team Lovely. So we've got 12 teams here, and by now we're building 22 services with this maintenance mode solution. So clearly, there's a burst in capacity here, right? This is a good thing. So that's the main thing that's really good with the solution. You get the uptick in capacity. You can build more services because you've pushed the other stuff into the background. And there's also a similar level of services reliability because throughout you've had your operations team doing live support for everyone. And because the developers are maintaining and doing all of those support tasks, the day-to-day maintenance work, on things they actually built, then they have the technical skills, they have the domain knowledge, so that's going to be okay. And you can still do some future feature delivery here, right? Because the team that built the thing still have it. They can move it into the foreground for a period of time. They can actually make some changes on it. What's bad here is job satisfaction is going to take a hit because people will feel like they're trying to do two things at once. They won't enjoy working on the background thing. And their work isn't really mission-oriented. It feels a bit like just code, typey. And also, you can't resize or retire teams when you just push work into the background. That's why a bunch of Equal Experts customers don't enjoy this particular solution. They don't believe that dedicated delivery teams are value for money when it comes to solely maintenance work on live services. And I think they're probably right, to be honest. I know a publishing company that has its delivery teams, must be 20 teams at least, running live services, maintaining live services in the background while the operations team does live support. The way they do it is they allocate 1 day a week, Fridays, to do the maintenance tasks on the old services. Nobody really designed this solution. It just kind of happened that way. And the developers don't enjoy it. They don't enjoy Fridays. They grumble a lot. They whine a lot about going back on Fridays to work on older tech, something that's less cool, less shiny. They can't try new stuff on it. They just have to go in and do a library upgrade or a security patch or something. It's not a thing that they really look forward to. And that's because they don't see the pain that the operations team are going through. They don't understand, or they forget that it's the live zero-demand services that subscriber revenues for this publishing company are actually flowing through. Right, here's all that information in a nice summary format. The columns are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and the outcomes we're trying to protect, and the rows are going to be our maintenance mode solutions. So we can now see at a glance that the delivery team solution increases capacity, it doesn't reduce costs, you can protect services reliability, you can protect feature delivery, and you can't protect the same level of job satisfaction. You're going to have some problems there. So that's all well and good. Now, I mentioned that I've got a maintenance mode survey for you. Here's a first look at the results. We asked about 40 different organizations, telcos, retailers, financial services companies. We wanted to know if our hypotheses about maintenance mode were actually being experienced by our customers. We wanted to know what the impact of these different variables were having on outcomes in the wild. So we asked people how their organization was approaching maintenance mode when they had many teams, many services. We asked about the impact it had on capacity, on costs, reliability, features, and developer satisfaction. So for the delivery team's maintenance mode solution, 58% of respondents agreed with us that they saw an increase in capacity once they moved their live zero-demand services into the background. And everyone agreed that they could not reduce costs with this solution. That is what we'd expect, right? Because by definition, you haven't got rid of any teams or resized any teams. Everyone's just doing more work now. 75% of people agreed with us that you could protect services reliability to a similar standard. Only 50% agreed about protecting feature delivery, which was a bit of a surprise. And some of the answers were quite eye-opening. One responder said, we were still thinking of new ideas, high-value stuff that would really benefit our customers. We tried to push it through the development teams, but IT managers kept saying no. They said that service is in maintenance mode now. The team has been disbanded and moved on. We can't touch that. So that's not good. Obviously, there's revenue opportunities being squandered there. And only 33% of respondents agreed with us that job satisfaction took a hit once delivery teams took on this new work. But of that 33%, some of the answers were pretty heartbreaking. Somebody said, over the last couple of months, we've really had to ramp up the maintenance tasks to improve the stability of our live monolith, and the developers just really don't enjoy spending that much time on the old system. And it's had a noticeable impact on team morale. Okay, so our next solution is the obvious one that I see in so many companies. Don't get the developers to do it. The operations team are already doing live support. What if we just dump even more work on the operations team who can't complain anyway because of the way we've set up our organization? That's a good idea. I should get promoted for that idea. Everyone says I should. So our second solution involves giving all the maintenance tasks to one team, the operations team. So back with our French retailer. It's not really French, but I like France. The last time I spoke at NewCrafts, I enraged a waiter at a nearby restaurant. I asked for a burger to be very well done. It came out medium as I expected. I said, thank you for my medium cooked burger. He called me a roast beef to my face, stormed off, and I never got dessert. I would do it all over again. So what we got, we've still got our, that actually happened. There are people in the room who were there. What actually happened was they said afterwards to the waiter, you didn't tell him that there's a fourth kind of burger. And the waiter said he doesn't want to hear about that. He's a roast beef. He doesn't want the blue burger. So yes, our 10 Non-differentiators, and now the blue lines, the maintenance mode transition, clearly show that when they reach zero demand, they go into the operations live support team. That team now is doing all the maintenance work and all the live support for everything. Those lucky, lucky people. And when the zero demand services are all moved into the operations team, you can now resize or retire teams. So as you can see in this example, we've retired a couple of teams and the other teams have taken on yet more services. And yes, their teams are still named after the services they're building because that is entirely the correct thing to do. Stop naming teams after Marvel characters. Nobody's impressed, especially me. Someone laughed really loudly then. They're like, yes, I'm on Team Thor. We don't know what we're building either. So there are some really good things about this solution that are important to acknowledge. You can create capacity for teams to build new propositions because one team is doing all the maintenance work. And you can reduce costs because you can resize or retire delivery teams as necessary. Hell, you can even outsource your operations team to a third-party managed service if you want to. But there is a word of caution there because when you outsource that maintenance work, you're trading away like foresight for future incidents. You don't have any understanding of how much BAU work needs to happen, how much work is happening to keep the lights on, and it could be a useful indicator of future problems down the line. But your operations team here is obviously super duper busy, and that creates a number of drawbacks here, okay? So first of all, reliability is going to take a hit, okay? Because your blameless operations analysts are affected by two things. Firstly, they're going to have a very high cognitive load. There's no limit to the number of zero demand services that can be imposed upon an operations team. They'll talk a really good game. They'll say they have a process you have to follow, a spreadsheet you have to fill in, but somebody will always turn up and say, you just have to give that to the operations team now, and they'll have to do it. That's how things are. I've known operations teams where they've had to implement security patches across tens or hundreds of live workloads at once against a background of live incidents and ongoing support improvements. It's a thankless task that they do well. And the second factor that affects our entirely 100% blameless operations analysts is they probably, through no fault of their own, don't have the technical skills or domain knowledge to rapidly complete maintenance tasks like fixing the code and updating automated functional tests after a library upgrade introduces like a breaking change. Think of all of the companies out there that have all of their maintenance work happening in their operations teams, and then something like Log4Shell happens, and every operations team is told you have to upgrade this thing you've never heard of called Log4j across hundreds of live workloads, and you have to do it yesterday. That's a really difficult situation to be in, right? Those problems with reliability, they're all going to have a knock-on impact, okay? They're going to affect technical quality. They're going to affect your time to failure and your time to restore service. And you can see it as a slower deployment lead time. You'll see that just gradually worsening over time. Another big problem with this solution is you really lose an ability for any kind of future feature delivery because of that probable lack of skills and knowledge, but also there's a huge prioritization problem here. When you give one team a whole hodgepodge of monoliths and microservices or a zoo of data pipelines, there's going to be many different business owners, okay? Or there'll be zero business owners because they're just all chucked down the well to the operations team, okay? So you've got one of two situations, either many business owners for many services or zero business owners for many services. The one thing you don't have is one business owner who can make a priority call across everything. So what you'll have is a lot of very difficult prioritization situations, or as I prefer to call them, bun fights. And there's really an endless bun fight here over an ever-growing support backlog. And the third big problem here is that there's a real absence of job satisfaction. It's really going to decline after you move into maintenance mode here, because developers will feel like they're in a never-ending feature factory, and your operations analysts will feel like they're in a never-ending dumping ground. So team churn and employee retention are going to be big problems for you. There is a countermeasure to these problems with this maintenance mode solution. I call it reverse service transition. It doesn't really have a name, so hopefully that sticks. What you do is you fund a short-lived delivery team. You pull a couple of live services back out of the operations team to make some code changes because your operations team don't have the time or capacity or skills to do it themselves. Maybe that new special team focuses on some reliability work. One of our current customers, Equal Experts, have created a reliability team, and what they're doing is it's a bunch of developers. They've been given, I think, 10 services, and they've got a really tight backlog of 10 or 15 stability enhancements they just have to make across the board to really harden the existing live services, while in parallel, a bunch of other teams are replacing all of this stuff with new shiny microservices. Or maybe this temporary team focuses on feature delivery. A couple of years ago, I worked with a customer where they had like a website team, let's say, a very vague name. But what they did was they took, I think, 10 items out of customer feedback and the operational support backlog and said, we're going to deliver these 10 things only. We've got a limited budget, but this will have a substantial impact on website revenue. And they were right, that worked really well. And afterwards, everyone said, why don't we do this more often? So what does it look like? Here's our retailer again. We mentioned that we have a non-differentiating payment service we just had to build. And we'll see up here that that payment service is being moved out of operations back into a new payments team, the V2 payments team. Does that payments team have anyone in it from the original payments team? Hell no. Of course that team was disbanded and those people have moved into other teams. That just is how things are. So this countermeasure is really flawed because everybody on the team is new to the domain. It's going to take time for them to get up to speed. And a reverse service transition out of an operations team back into a delivery team is even more painful than the original transition from the developers into the operations team. It really sucks. And of course, when this special short-lived delivery team has finished their work, what happens? We're going to transition it all back into the operations team all over again. I know a car repair company. They have an operations team that is maintaining and supporting the ePOS software that drives the customer tills and actually sorts out customer payments on site in their bricks and mortar stores. The original delivery team that built this ePOS software had to complete a 300-question spreadsheet before their service could be transitioned into the operations team. And everybody said, that's all finished now, no more changes. And then, of course, 2 years later, the government of that country said, oh, we've got these new payment regulations. You're going to really enjoy these. And the car repair company's operations team said, funny story. We don't think we can actually do these changes. We don't have the capacity. They were already in a situation where performance updates, library upgrades, they didn't necessarily, not everybody in the ops team had the skills to do it. Some did, some didn't. So some changes happened slower than people would like. Performance improvements reached customers in stores slower than everybody would have liked. But when the payment regulations came out, the answer was, let's create another delivery team. So they pulled the payment service back into the developer team. There was a very tricky negotiation for some weeks over who would do what when. And when they finished the work for the regulations, what did they have to do? They had to do that 300-question spreadsheet all over again before the operations team would take the service over. And what happened a year later? The government announced more payment regulation changes. By this point, to their credit, the car repair company decided, let's skill up the operations team into almost a form of you build it your own and they can do it for themselves. But overall, it was a time-consuming, wasteful merry-go-round of chaos that I really don't recommend. Okay, so problematic maintenance mode solution, there are countermeasures to it, they introduce more problems. So when we summarize the solution in terms of outcomes, you can see that it achieves the two new outcomes that we're looking for. It does help you to increase capacity. It does help you to reduce costs. But That probably explains why this solution is popular, right? Because it gives you those two things that you're thinking about today. But it fails to protect the existing outcomes that we're looking to protect, and that probably explains why I see this maintenance mode solution cause so many problems. Okay, so back to our survey results, this time for the operations team solution. These results were kind of heartbreaking, like this isn't a good solution, right? So 66% of respondents agreed with us that capacity could be increased by putting zero demand services into the operations team, and 55% agreed that costs could be reduced. That's all good. 55% said that service reliability could not be preserved at the same level. One responder said, "We had a lovely time once." Whenever a sentence starts with "we had a lovely time once," you know that the narrator is British, and they did not have a lovely time. They said, "We had a deployment at 2 a.m. It went a bit wrong. We spent the next 48 hours fixing it and rolling forwards because the operations team had been unable to complete maintenance tasks for the past year, so rollback was completely impossible." And a different 55% said that feature delivery could not be protected to the same level. One responder angrily wrote to me, mostly in capital letters, saying the ability for this company to handle maintenance work is the most painful thing for the company to grasp. They have massive outsourced operations contracts with no allocation for maintenance work. Everything has to be a change request and a purchase order. The amount of waste in this company when it comes to maintenance mode is absolutely criminal. Don't worry, I have actually phoned the police about that one and reported the criminal waste. They said to stop phoning them about fictional French retailers. They have actual crimes to solve in Paris. And finally, 88% said that there was a huge problem with job satisfaction. One person said, "The operations team are deeply unhappy and I feel really bad for them. It's almost as if there's a proportional relationship between happiness with maintenance work and familiarity with the live service itself." All right, so we've heard about two solutions in the wild that really don't work. Let's talk about a different solution, something that we've put a lot of thought into recently, and we're now trialing with one of our customers. But before I talk about multi-product teams as a maintenance mode solution, I need to talk about you build it, you run it. So you build it, you run it. If you're not familiar with it, it's an operating model in which product teams build, deploy, operate, and support their own digital services. It's how my colleague Beth Ann Timmins and I describe you build it, you run it. We've written a big, giant playbook all about you build it, you run it. It's available for free at that QR code. No email gates, no pay gates, none of that rubbish. Who here would say they're working on a team right now that's you build it, you run it, where you're a developer and you're on call for the thing you build? Excellent, that's good, always good to see. Okay, the numbers go up each year. So with you build it, you run it, you don't have delivery teams building features. You have empowered teams building and running their own live services. The product manager is incentivized to prioritize reliability alongside functionality because they are accountable for both. Developers are incentivized to think harder about the changes they're making, about the tests they write, about the monitoring dashboards they create, about the funky code that they think they have to do, because they're on call at 3 a.m. for their own work. It has a big impact. I remember the first time I was on call for my own work, and I spent ages dithering over how I was going to TDD something because I really didn't want to be woken up. So you can think about you build it, you run it as better insurance, more valuable insurance, better insurance for your more valuable business outcomes. The more valuable contents you have in your house, the more important it is to have superior home insurance. We collaborated with one of our larger customers to introduce you build it, you run it. They had 30 teams, 40 digital services composed of multiple microservices, because their central operations team was so focused on maintaining their foundational systems that they just didn't have the capacity to manage any digital services. You build it, you run it resulted in a annual deploy count that was 26 times higher than before. What were the other numbers? Because I'm really quite proud of them. A time to repair that was twice as fast as before, and a level of revenue protection, that's the amount of expected revenue loss per incident that you actually reclaim with a time to restore that's faster than expected. That was 4 times higher than before, so it saved a lot of money. So you build it your own, it's a good thing for individual teams. The trick here is to apply the same principles of outcome-oriented teams, zero handoffs, and clear incentives to maintenance mode. And that's where the idea of multi-product teams comes in. Why not apply empowered product teams to zero-demand services and tie them to particular product families? So here's our French retailer again. One final time. It's not really French, but I like France. Yesterday I went to Gare du Nord and I didn't have any UK to Euro adapters. I know I screwed up. So I'm in Gare du Nord. This is the right place to find some plug adapters. I went to the first shop. Do you have any UK plug adapters? No. I went to the second place. I did start with bonjour. I'm not an idiot. I know to start with bonjour. So I was like, bonjour, in the second shop, do you have any UK plug adapters? And the lady looked at me very sadly. And I thought, finally, this is where a French person helps me. And I started with bonjour. And she said, no UK travel adapters, not since Brexit. And I immediately just panicked and said, je suis désolé, nous sommes devant vous. And she said, say sorry to yourself. Okay, so with multi-product teams, that did happen. Fucking so ridiculous. I started with bonjour, I thought you'd be my friend. So multi-product teams, what we do is we have product teams building and running their own services. So the payments team build and run their own service. Order capture, build and run their own service. All these teams building and running their own services. It's a beautiful sight. They don't do it forever. No one says you build it, you run it, has to be forever, okay, with the same team. When a zero-demand service in a product family is a thing, you transfer it into a multi-product team, which you can see here down at the bottom. There's one for each of the 2 product families, one for customer services, one for customer journeys. And it's a team staffed by developers, and it's focused exclusively on the reliability outcomes for the zero-demand services. So still outcome-oriented, still empowered. There's no product manager in those teams. That would wrongly imply like a planned feature backlog. But that team does report into the product lead for that entire product family. So now we've got 5 live services in the first family, 5 live services in the second family, going into the 2 different multi-product teams when they're ready to. And when the zero-demand services reach the multi-product teams, you get that ability again to resize and retire teams as you wish. So as always, you've got your 2 differentiators, online checkout, product details page for the long term, and your other teams are more short-lived. But crucially, customer journeys and customer services are also your long-term teams looking after all the non-differentiators when they run out of funding. So the number of teams resized and retired here isn't as important as the idea of just applying you build it, you run it to more than a single long-lived product team. All right, what's good here? A lot of stuff. You've got the capacity to build and run more live services, to deliver more value to your customers because you can reassign teams to new services. You've got the ability to reduce costs because you can resize, retire teams as you wish. It's easier to transfer a live service between a product team and a multi-product team than compared to a delivery team and an operations team because there's a similar culture, there's similar ways of working, there's similar incentives. Teams have the skills and domain knowledge to preserve a level of services reliability similar to before because you've got developers dedicated to maintenance tasks. They have the technical skills. They can build the domain knowledge. The cognitive load for a multi-product team is constrained to the number of zero-demand services in a particular product family. And if it gets to be too much, you can always slice a product family team into product domain teams. That's a little bit advanced, but that's possible. But the main thing there is the business context is manageable, right? You're not drowning developers in like so much business knowledge that they can't fit into their heads. Future feature delivery can happen at pace, not just because the developers have the skills and domain knowledge, but because there's a product lead that a multi-product team reports into, and that product lead can prioritize work across different zero-demand services because they all belong to their own product family. Okay, that's the key to being able to move quickly on feature delivery, that there's one apex decision maker who can choose between different services. And developers have job satisfaction. They have mission-oriented teams. They have a sense of purpose. They're trusted to deliver on the reliability outcomes across a whole product family. There's also some bad things here, some things you have to get right. You do need strong guardrails for this, because there will be cultural factors in your organization that leave you predisposed to maintenance mode dumping grounds. The most common guardrails that I recommend to customers are a strong definition of what zero demand actually is. I would suggest something like non-differentiator, 3 months of live traffic already, and the product manager has declared there's limited funding remaining, but your definition will depend on your own context. You also need the multi-product teams to have a very strong identity. You need to make it really clear that you can't just chuck any old work into them. The obvious way to do that is to name the multi-product team after the product family itself. You may recall in the previous example, those teams were called the customer journeys team and the customer services team. And that was deliberate. And another great guardrail to have is an automated service transfer process. So I would want an easy transfer between teams. I'd want an internal developer platform. I'd want self-service paved roads, but I want lots of stuff out of life. And the really tricky thing here, of course, is you have to explain to people why paying for 2 teams, 2 multi-product teams, is a better idea than paying for 1 operations team who probably already exist. And that's tricky. You need to shift the conversation from being like a cost-based conversation into a value-based conversation. You need to help people understand that there's a level of services reliability and feature delivery and job satisfaction that you have to preserve. You can't just chase the short-term capacity and cost outcomes that you're looking for. You'll want to create some kind of dashboards that show the business metrics that matter and show how a multi-product team can sustain those metrics. And you'll need to find some clever ways to dump on the idea of having your operations team do this, because it's a bad idea. Okay, a final look at our summary table. So we're pretty confident that multi-product teams will be able to achieve all of the outcomes that you're looking for. We're about to trial it with one of our long-term partners, an organization with 40 teams, a lot of microservices, and they're looking to reduce costs. And crucially, they've had you build it your own at scale for a number of years now, and they don't want to sacrifice those benefits. They know that putting everything into an operations team would be a mistake. So they're looking for something different, and we think that's what we can offer here. Okay, what have we learned? When you leave here today, there are 3 things that I'd like you to take away. If you're in an IT cost center, zero-demand services are an inevitability. You will need the maintenance mode solution. You should start planning for it now ahead of time. Otherwise, you'll just drop into developers doing it or operations doing it by default. Number 2, don't automatically chuck everything into your operations team. Okay? Try to find the person who makes the decision and persuade them that there's a different way of doing things. Try to demonstrate to them that you are sacrificing long-term outcomes for short-term outcomes. You will have an impact on reliability. You will have an impact on feature delivery. You will have an impact on job satisfaction. And the third thing I'd like to take away, the really important one, is if you move from delivery teams to you build it, you run it, if you move from disempowered developers to empowered product teams, then moving to multi-product teams to maintenance mode is going to be a really natural fit for you. So thank you for listening to me. If you'd like to get in touch, you can get hold of me on LinkedIn through that QR code, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thanks very much.